Hello, Wanderers of the Night. Welcome back to Shadow Storyteller, the channel where shadows speak and forgotten tales come alive. Tonight, we're traveling deep into the misty countryside of England, to a place locals would rather forget, a place whispered about only when the lights are on and the doors are locked. They call it the motel room no one dares to talk about. The year was 1998, a damp October evening in North Yorkshire, when the rain seemed endless and moors outside of Scarborough stretched into a black, unbroken horizon. Thomas Whitaker, a 34-year-old traveling salesman from Leeds, had been driving for hours. His eyes stung from fatigue, and the winding country lanes were slick with rain. He spotted the glow of a neon sign through the fog, Ravenscroft Motel. The building stood isolated on the edge of the road, its brickwork darkened with years of neglect, the windows streaked with condensation. Thomas hesitated, but exhaustion overpowered caution. He pulled into the gravel car park, where puddles reflected the dim, flickering sign. Inside, the reception smelled faintly of damp carpets and old tobacco. The woman at the desk, an older figure with hollow eyes and a smile that didn't reach her face, handed him a brass key without much conversation. "Room number 6, she muttered, almost as if she regretted saying it. The hallway leading to his room was narrow, the wallpaper peeling in strips, and the buzzing overhead light gave off an eerie hum that matched the pounding in Thomas's temples. The door to room 6 was heavier than expected, its surface scratched, as though someone had tried to claw their way out. He inserted the key, and the lock gave with a reluctant click. The room inside was suffocatingly stale. A single bed pressed against the wall, sheets tucked too tightly, a wooden wardrobe with one door slightly ajar, and a window facing the moors, rattling softly with each gust of wind. The rain tapped against the glass like impatient fingers. As he set his suitcase down, Thomas noticed something unsettling. The mirror above the dresser was cracked, and though his reflection was visible, there was a delay, as if it lagged behind his movements by a fraction of a second. He blinked hard, shook his head, and told himself it was a fatigue. He turned on the small bedside lamp, its yellow glow barely cutting through the gloom. That was when he noticed a smell, faint metallic, like rusted iron or dry blood. He glanced around, searching for the source, but the room appeared clean, almost too clean, as though someone had scrubbed it frantically not long ago. He lay down, telling himself he'd only sleep for a few hours before leaving at dawn. But as the clock on the bedside table ticked toward midnight, the atmosphere thickened. The radiator hissed though it wasn't on, the wardrobe door creaked wider on its own, and the air grew colder, heavy enough to make his breath visible. Then came the sound, a low knock, not on the door leading to the hallway, but from inside the wardrobe. Thomas froze, his chest tightening. His ears strained in the silence that followed, only to hear again 3 dull, deliberate knocks, the kind of sound that carries intent. He sat up, heart pounding against his ribs, eyes locked on the dark gap between the wardrobe doors. The knock stopped, but something shifted inside. The knocks from the wardrobe lingered in Thomas's mind long after the silence had returned. He sat completely still, listening, his hand tightening on the edge of the blanket. The rain outside had softened, replaced by the constant moan of the wind sweeping over the moors. He thought perhaps it had been the building settling, or his tired mind imagining things. But no amount of logic calmed the feeling that the room itself was aware of him. The wardrobe loomed in the corner, its half-open door like a mouth caught mid-whisper. Thomas forced himself to stand, his shoes pressed against the worn carpet, muffling his steps as he approached. The smell grew sharper, that metallic tang, mixed with something musty, like damp wood. He reached the wardrobe and placed a hand on the door, the wood unnaturally cold under his palm. "Hello," he muttered, feeling absurd as soon as the word left his mouth. His own voice sounded hollow, out of place. He pushed the door fully open. Inside, the wardrobe was empty. No coats, no hangers, nothing but darkness stretching back further than seemed possible. He leaned in, narrowing his eyes. For a moment, he swore the blackness deepened, as though the back wall was missing. But when he reached forward, his fingers brushed wood. He let out a shaky laugh and closed the door again, retreating to the bed. Still, he couldn't shake it. Something in that room felt wrong. He left the bedside lamp on, sat up against the headboard, and tried to distract himself by leafing through an old paperback he carried in his case. The words blurred. Sleep tugged at his eyes, heavy and insistent. Finally, exhaustion dragged him down. When he woke, it was 2:47 a.m. The clock's red numbers glowed in the dim room. His throat was dry and his skin clammy. It took him a moment to realize what had woken him. The sound of breathing. It wasn't his. It came from the wardrobe. Slow, steady, deliberate breaths, as though someone was standing just behind the door, waiting. Thomas's body locked up, the primal urge to flee battling with the paralysis of terror. He forced himself to move, reaching for the bedside lamp. The bulb flickered violently, then went out with a faint pop. Darkness swallowed the room. His pulse hammered in his ears. In the blackness, the breathing grew louder, closer, until he swore he felt the warmth of it against his cheek. He bolted upright, scrambling for the door. His hands fumbled with the lock, slick with sweat before it gave way. He yanked the door open and stumbled into the corridor, gasping for air. The hallway was dimly lit, the same buzzing fluorescent lights casting pale shadows along the peeling wallpaper. But it was silent. No breathing, no footsteps. He stood there, trembling, until a voice startled him. Late night walk. The motel receptionist, the same older woman from before, stood at the end of the corridor. Her face was partially obscured by shadow, but he could see the faintest curl of a smile. There's something in my room, Thomas stammered, pointing back toward the door of room 6. The woman's expression didn't change. Room 6, she said softly, almost to herself. Did you hear me? Thomas demanded, voice rising. There's someone in there, breathing, knocking. I'm not imagining this. The woman shook her head slowly, her eyes unreadable. It's best not to disturb them. Go back inside, Mr. Whitaker. Close the door. Try to rest. They usually quiet down by morning. He froze, heart pounding. What do you mean, they? But she didn't answer. She turned and walked down the corridor, her figure swallowed by the gloom. Thomas stood rooted to the spot, a sick dread settling into his stomach. He couldn't face going back into the room, yet the thought of standing in the hallway felt just as dangerous. After several agonizing minutes, he forced himself back inside, switching on the bathroom light to keep the room dimly illuminated. The wardrobe stood silently in the corner, its door slightly ajar. Morning came, though Thomas barely slept. The sunlight that crept through the grimy curtains brought little comfort. He checked out quickly, avoiding the receptionist's gaze. She handed him his receipt without a word, though he noticed her hand lingered over the brass key before sliding it away. Driving back onto the wet road, Thomas promised himself he would never return, but the room did not leave him. In the weeks that followed, back in Leeds, he dreamed of the wardrobe every night. Always the same, standing in the dark room, hearing that breath just behind the door, too afraid to open it. He grew pale, anxious, snapping at colleagues, avoiding his sales routes near the coast. When he finally confided in a friend, Mark Ellison, the man raised an eyebrow. Ravenscroft Motel? Mark repeated. You stayed there? Christ, Tom, no wonder. What do you mean? Thomas asked sharply. Mark lowered his voice. They sat in a quiet corner of a pub near Headingley. The sound of clinking glasses and low conversation around them. That place has been around for decades, since the 60s. Locals say it was built on old farmland, but not the good kind. There were stories, even before the motel, murders, people vanishing on the moors. Room 6, though, that's the one no one touches. Why? Thomas pressed. Mark leaned in closer. Back in the 70s, a couple stayed there. Margaret and Stephen Rowe. Newlyweds. They never checked out. Police found the room empty, bed untouched, their car still in the car park. Just gone. Then, in the 80s, a lorry driver. Same thing. Last seen entering room 6. Never seen again. And in the 90s, he stopped, eyeing Thomas carefully. You're not the first to hear the breathing. Thomas's skin prickled. He swallowed hard, the pint glass trembling slightly in his hand. So, why do they still rent out? Mark gave a humorless laugh. Because no one likes to admit the truth. And because there are always people passing through. People who don't know the stories. People like you. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep again. He lay awake, his mind spinning, haunted by Mark's words. He tried to convince himself it was all coincidence, urban legends dressed up as warnings. But something gnawed at him. 3 nights later, he found himself back on the road toward Scarborough. He didn't remember deciding. He only realized it when the neon glow of Ravenscroft Motel appeared once more through the mist. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. Part of him screamed to turn back, but another part, the deeper, darker part, urged him on. This time, when he stepped into the reception, the older woman was gone. A younger man stood behind the counter, leafing through a newspaper. He looked up and smiled faintly. Evening. Near room. Thomas hesitated. His throat felt dry. Room 6, he heard himself say. The man paused. For a moment, the smile slipped. Are you sure? Yes, Thomas replied. His own voice sounded foreign. The man slid the brass key across the counter. No questions asked. The hallway was the same as before, buzzing light, peeling wallpaper, the smell of damp. He unlocked room 6 and stepped inside. The air greeted him like a familiar hand, heavy and metallic. The wardrobe waited in the corner. He closed the door behind him, set his bag down, and sat on the edge of the bed. The clock ticked softly. The wardrobe door stood slightly open, just enough for darkness to seep through. This time, Thomas didn't plan to wait for the knocks. He stood, crossed the room, and pulled the door wide. The wardrobe was empty, but as he leaned closer, the darkness deepened again, pulling at his vision. The wood no longer felt solid beneath his fingers. He thought he saw movement, shadows twisting, shapes that weren't quite human. The breathing returned, loud and steady, coming from somewhere impossibly deep within. Thomas reached out his hand, and something reached back. Thomas gasped, jerking his hand back, but it was too late. Whatever had brushed his skin had been ice cold, texture like damp earth and bone. The sensation lingered, crawling up his arm, even though nothing visible clung to him. The wardrobe's darkness pulsed, swelling like a living thing. From deep within a whisper rose, layered voices speaking in tones too low to understand. Yet their intent was unmistakable. They wanted him closer. The bedside clock flickered. The red number stuttered between minutes, then froze at 3 a.m. The air grew unbearably heavy, pressing against his chest. The mirror above the dresser cracked further, the sound like splintering glass echoing in the silence. Thomas stumbled backward, his heart slamming wildly, but his feet felt anchored. Every shadow in the room seemed to shift, angling toward him, waiting. He realized then, with a dread that hollowed him out, that the receptionist had not been warning him. She had been preparing him. Room 6 did not want guests. It wanted offerings. and Thomas Whitaker on that rain-soaked October night in 1998 was the latest name to be whispered in Ravenscroft's long, unspoken history. When dawn came, the bed was neatly made. His car sat abandoned in the gravel car park. The brass key rested on the reception desk, as though it had never left. Locals would later shrug if asked. The Ravenscroft Motel? Best to avoid it, they'd say, especially room 6. But no one ever explained why. No one ever dared. Because in that corner of North Yorkshire, everyone knew the truth. And they all knew that sooner or later, another tired traveler would see the neon sign to the mist and make the same mistake.